it's EJ, one of the hosts here at Behind the Mask, and Lori and T are joining me today. This is episode 40, The Masks of Personalities. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This is going to be an interesting episode because we're going to be talking a little bit more about ourselves, because we decided to take the personality test on 16personalities.com. I believe it's .com.
Yes.
And it was very eye-opening. The results I had were very obvious, me. And Lori definitely got a lot of the results I expected her to get, and so did T. And we also took the Clutter Bug test on Clutter Bug's website. It's an organizational person who came up with this, realizing that people are certain bugs depending on how they organize and deal with clutter. So we took that test, and mine definitely goes along with my personality, and I know T's does too. And Lori's is definitely Lori. So we're going to talk a little bit about our results. We're going to talk a little bit about what do we do now that we know these things, and how much Lori and I have already laughed a lot about like what her result is and my result definitely are completely different organizers. So, and so.
It was really fun. T, this is based, the one off of 16personalities.com. That is based off of the more complex Myers-Briggs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I've taken it a few times, and we're going to, talk some more about this as we share our results. But one of the things you and I have noticed, being a little older than Miss EJ over there, is that, and having taken it multiple times, that our personalities can change. We can be in different seasons of life. We can be at different maturity levels. We just have had different life experiences. And so I think it's important to remember that these are not static. We're not stuck. And if there's something that you're like, I think I'd really like to work on that, you can do that. And, I've been doing all this research for another project, and it's largely based out of cognitive behavior theory, right? Where it's so much about retraining your brain, creating new pathways and new habits. And so I just think it's important to share that right up front. You're not stuck. Don't be disappointed. Try to just embrace this. We encourage all of our listeners, go out. EJ is going to put the link in the description of the podcast. Go out, take the test yourself, see if you can get some friends to do it with you, and talk about these things. Have some fun with it. Don't let it be like this dark diagnostic thing, because that's really not what it is. So I just wanted to say that right off the bat.
And I would like to throw in there just real quick. At each personality trait, when you do these quizzes and whatnot, they have their strengths and their weaknesses. So it might not be about changing. It may be evaluating, not wanting what others have, but embracing what you have. There are a lot of positives to every personality type, because we can't have a whole bunch of cooks in the kitchen. Right. Sometimes we need, people doing customer service, and, just using that analogy. And so it's not always about changing who you are, but some of it's embracing aspects of it.
Yes.
But there can be change For example, I'm ecstatic to watch my assertive score going up over time, because that was an area that was very difficult for me. And if I was experiencing any sort of emotional pain, it was usually around the fact that I wasn't assertive. So that, for example.
Yeah, that's a great example. I love it.
And I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's kind of odd too, because I was, I studied Spanish for 5 years in school, and there's 2 different to be verbs in the Spanish language. And one of them is for you're doing something like right now, like I'm recording a podcast. Whereas there's the other one to be, which is I am this. And it's supposed to be something you it's not going to change. And it's so weird that that's the verb you use when you talk about the personality traits of people, like they're intelligent or they're elegant or they're beautiful. I'm like, but they can change. And I think even in school, when I first started learning them, it was hard for me to differentiate because it didn't make sense to me. Because I'm like, we can change our personalities over time. So why isn't it the other verb? And so, in an English language, we just have I am and I am, we don't have 2 verbs to differentiate between the 2. So that kind of goes along with what T was saying too. And it's not, stagnant, and you can change your personality if you want to. And, like Lori had said, it's Tina and Lori have more life experience than I do. They're both moms and grandmas. I am not that. So there's experiences that I don't have. And I admit there's a lot of those questions were really hard to answer for me. And I tried to just take the best that I could. And some of them were a little closer. And so some of my results are like kind of right on the borderline of 50-50. And this, it gives us a percentage. It doesn't just say you are this and you are that. It's like a spectrum scale, and like you're 75% this or 42% this. And I think I like that, because then it shows like, okay, well, if I'm on the borderline, I can understand that. But if I'm way up there, I don't know if that's ever going to change. But yeah,
I'm never not going to be an extrovert. That's just not going to happen.
Right. That's funny you say that, Lori, because I was just thinking, I don't have any desire to change my introvert part of myself.
Yeah.
Like I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. I think one of the things I noticed when I looked at the results of my test, there were a couple of things that weren't as accurate. Most of it was, most of it, but specifically the one where I'll chase down a friend to stay in contact. I'm like, no, usually people have to chase me down. And
yes, we do.
But if I were to look at what drives that outcome of my assessment, that's probably an area that I was closer to the 50-50 mark. Like I could do or not do. And so it was just a little over the line. So that was part of the description. But the rest of it was pretty accurate,
Yeah. Well, so we started with that. So Lori was 95% extrovert.
No surprise.
He was 76% introverted, and I am 82% introverted. So my there's no mistaking I'm an introvert, and I'm what they call an turbulent architect, who are introverted, intuitive, they think a lot, they judge a lot, they're turbulent. They love perfecting the details of life and applying creativity and rationality, which is so me. T is a defender. She's a very dedicated and warm protector, always ready to defend their loved ones. And Lori is a protagonist. She's charismatic and an inspiring leader, able to mesmerize their listeners. That is what the descriptions of it, that's what 16 personalities describe each personality as.
In a brief little snippet.
Yeah. And it's really cool because when you take this test, you can, it gives you your letters, and then it also gives you a breakdown of what they are, your percentages. It also gives you a ton of resources to look at, and how your relationships can impact between friendships, relationships, all that. So it's not just here's your results and go do with what you want. There's actually resources on there that help let you look at some of that stuff.
What I loved about it too, I was looking at the pay options. The pay options are just like, you're getting all of this stuff for free, like a complete layout. The pay options are like, okay, so what, here's our suggestions for this personality type in work or in relationships and what, and those are the pay options. You pay for those. And they were actually not too bad when I was looking at them, but I was like, I just got everything I wanted in this. So that's really great. And it is like we talked earlier, based on a research that has been years in the making, long before the 16 personalities came along. It's called the Myers-Briggs, and it gives you those letters that EJ was just talking about and whatnot. But there is so much research and study that went into it, and then to have the access for us to be able to look at, and we can use it, what we learn. What I find interesting is that Lori is so extroverted, and I used to be even more introverted than I am now, when we first met, and how we had to figure out how to manage our relationship with her being such an extrovert and me being an introvert. I literally need quiet to be able to recharge. Lori cannot stand quiet. She's not going to recharge in quiet. She's going to actually, her batteries deplete if she's isolated and alone, where she recharges by being around people. To me, that does not make any sense at all.
I agree.
At all. I'm like, I don't even, yep. So, but we had to hit this point where we realized that about each other, and we loved each other enough to be able to respect that about each other. And and so now we're it's more symbiotic, and then we're able to help each other out, because when she needs that social, I can give that to her, but then when I need to recharge, she can give that to me.
I love that when we embrace this, when we look at it as, okay, we always have to figure ourselves out, because if you can't figure yourself out, how are you going to figure out how you're going to communicate and work with? And, I've shared this a couple of times in my life, and I'm not sure if I've shared it here on the podcast, but because of a lot of my history and my past, I was raised one way, and yet it was very, very different than who I was at my core. And so I was like, it was years later, I was a young adult working in the banking industry, and we took a similar little test. And the idea of these tests, they were colors, orange, gold, green, and blue. And I had almost no green, because that was like the scientific thinky person, and that wasn't me. And then there was blue, was like the feeling and the Labrador and the emotional. And because of the way I feel like I was raised, I really didn't have much of that either. It was somewhere in there, but I just buried it for so long, But then there's the orange and the gold, and they're complete opposites. One is very entrepreneurial, fly by the seat of your pants, go, 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 often very extroverted. It was me to a core, like, oh. But because of the way that I was raised in a much more militaristic, shall we say, upbringing, which is gold, orderly, defined, almost neurotically orderly. I still had those traits because that's how I was raised. I just feel like that was something that was drummed into me. You didn't have an option. That was part of the household that you grew up in. And
sorry
so
about that, everybody. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. So if you kind of, we'll try and jump in right where we lost it, but just in case we don't, bear with us.
So really, my thought process in sharing what I shared about this other kind of personality test was that, again, like I stated earlier, it doesn't mean things can't change. We're not static. And when we embrace these personality tests and our strengths and our weaknesses, it's, you get to see growth, you get to see change. And so I didn't used to be as assertive as I am now. Or I should clarify, I've always been assertive in my skills, in work, in the way that I study. In that area, I'm very confident, I have no problems. But in my personal life, being assertive was not something that I did very well. But I've learned counseling and classes and life experiences, everything else, that I can set healthy boundaries and be more assertive within my own personal life. The most freeing experience after this class that I had taken was I had always been somebody's child, somebody's wife, because I went from being at home with mom and dad to being married. I was married very, very young, 18, and then I was living overseas, and it was sink or swim, because it was just us, living in another country and, having all this stuff. So I felt like most of my life, even my young adult life, was being somebody else's something, daughter, wife, whatever it was, sibling. So after the divorce, I'm in the banking industry, I'm doing this class, and I went to the grocery store that night, and I'm in the freezer department, and I'm picking out some frozen vegetables, and I had a bag of peas in my hand, and I was going to put it in the basket. And this thought came over me. I was like, but Lori, you don't like peas. And I put the peas back, and I grabbed a bag of spinach, and I'm like, oh, yeah. I know it's so crazy, but that was so freeing and so liberating and so empowering at that time in my life to realize that I could, buy something that I like, do something for myself, And again, we never want to be selfish. I'm never advocating that. I'm a faithful believer. We're called to a sacrificial life. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean we don't get to enjoy some of life. And it doesn't mean we don't get to self-care. And I'm just learning all of those things. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. Yeah.
And then an interesting thought that I just had as you were talking is, if we don't know ourselves and don't have this awareness and whatnot, and we're living a sacrificial life, then it's willy-nilly. It's not really doing anyone any good, because it's just people who don't know themselves and what they're capable of and how much they have to give don't know what to sacrifice, so they just sacrifice everything. And then it's not, the meaning behind it isn't there. You're just exhausting yourself and wearing yourself down and probably feeling very chaotic on the inside. But if you know who you are, you know what your skills are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, then when you do that sacrificial living, it's with purpose. And it's going to be far more beneficial for anyone that's receiving that. But it's also a way for God to benefit you in it, because I've always felt like if I'm doing all the things that I think God wants me to do, I should not feel exhausted in doing it. Yes. If I'm feeling exhausted, then I might not be listening to what He really wants me to be doing.
Mm-hmm. That's a definite burnout, and we talk about that in the church. If you're burning out, mm-hmm. then are you really, where God wants you to be? Are you really tapping into what
Yes.
what he created? Yeah, God creates these beautiful people in his image, and then so many times we don't embrace it for whatever reason.
Or we're embracing other people's image.
Right.
Oh, goodness
Ideas
gracious.
of who we should be.
We're obsessed with that. Can you talk a little bit about that, T?
Well, if you look at it from like the social psychology aspect of it, or even sociology, we desire to be in groups. We need to be, with the exception of a few personalities, need to be in groups. Even us introverts, we still need people. We still need to know that we're a part of a bigger picture. If you look at it from a sociologist point of view, they're talking about how if you're not in a group, then you're not safe, because historically you were more vulnerable if you were isolated. So you always try to live up to the group norm of whatever group you're in. And the closer you are to that group norm, the more safe you are. The farther away you are from that norm, the more you risk being kicked out of the group. And so we just have that sort of mentality. I think if we look in the Bible, God even places us in groups. Like there's groups of people, and those who didn't fit in the groups and were ostracized, there was often trouble. Now, sometimes that was God's intent, like the prophets. Oftentimes they were ostracized. They weren't accepted as a part of the group. And so they had difficulties, but God used that. But then there were those who didn't do things according to God, and then they were ostracized, and they were vulnerable in that way. So, like Cain and Abel, yeah, that one gets sent out into the wilderness and whatnot. So, yeah, so we desire to fit in because of that.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you had something to add.
Oh, well, no, I was just going to actually continue on, because I know we got 5 letters and we've talked a lot about introvert, and I wanted to at least touch on a little bit of what some of the other letters are, because we've kind of touched on some of them in our conversation. So you're given 5 letters. One of them represents your introvert or extrovert. So as you know, T and I discussed, we're the I. I'm an N, which is representing intuitiveness, which is I'm only 51%. So it's kind of could go back and forth, but they describe an intuitive person, which I believe Lori is as well.
I am.
I used to be.
Yeah. An intuitive person is very imaginative and open-minded, focusing on hidden meanings and distant possibilities. The opposite of that is being observant, which I believe is what T is. I couldn't find the description of that since I didn't get that as a result. So T, could you explain what they represent as an observant?
I'm having to try to do it from memory. I think it's just someone who it's like the word indicates, they observe, they listen, they think, they base their decisions on thinking rather than fly by the seat of your pants. And so more planning and stuff like that. Do you have there what my percentage was on this one?
You were 54% observant.
Okay, that explains a lot, because it used to come up as intuitive when I've done these tests in the past. And I was very much a fly by the seat of my pants, and very creative, and operated very well under those circumstances. So I remember being kind of surprised this time that it came up as a no.
Yeah.
Don't you think that part of that is your job?
Yeah, I have to spend more time listening than talking.
Right.
And again, it's just part of your working environment, and that affects those things.
And I'm so close to that 50%. I think I go back and forth because I am an idea person, and sometimes can't shut up.
Which, I'm only 51%. So I could be either one too. So you and I are kind of in that similar boat. We're both right at that 50% area. And, kind of could go back and
I'm
forth
like,
depending on how, yeah,
my percentage is, I was 66.
Yeah,
so,
you're 66%.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think in the past, I used to be even more. So it's kind of
right.
slowly that pendulum is swinging a little bit, but
right.
I'm definitely intuitive.
Then we have our next one, which I was the only one that came up. Well, again, I'm 52% this. I'm thinking. The opposite of it is feeling. So in thinking, you likely focus on objectivity and rationality, putting effectiveness above social harmony. So I totally am that. So I'm surprised I didn't score higher because that's definitely me. But Lori and T got the opposite. They got feeling, which is value emotional expression and sensitivity. They place a lot of importance on empathy, social harmony, and cooperation.
That sounds like T and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in T, you got it 82%.
Sorry.
And Lori was 67%. So she's a little closer to the middle ground, but you scored high. Do you definitely feel that that's pretty accurate for you, or?
Yes. Yes. And I think we can definitely, I think it would have been there anyway, but we can definitely thank my job for a lot of that, because most of my job is about feelings. Definitely not all. There's, it's definitely thinking and behavior and all that stuff. But I have to be in tune with other people's feelings. And that actually comes from childhood too. That's how I stayed safe, is staying in tune with feelings so that I could try to predict what was going to happen next.
Amen. Well said.
And we actually have a letter in common in all three of us, which I was actually surprised about. I didn't even connect the dots till this morning, but we are all judging.
That's not as bad as it sounds.
I know. Read the description.
I had to look at it twice because I'm like, I don't judge people.
Offended. Yeah.
I was like, I don't judge people. Okay, so judging, I'm 85% judging. T is 51% judging, and Lori is 76% judging. So Lori and I are a little higher on the closer to being judging. T is a little more in the middle ground. Judging represents you're mostly judging. You like decisive, thorough, and be highly organized. You value clarity and prefer planning to spontaneity. I agree. I enjoy planning, and Lori's learning that a little bit as we start to plan a road trip. I'm a planner. I want to have be prepared for, just about anything that could happen. It's going to be a road trip. So, I'm like, I want to make sure that I have my cars ready, that I have things to start my car if God forbid the battery dies and we're in the middle of nowhere or something. And she's just like, I don't want to hear about it. Just
I think the other day my exact words were, you can process that all by yourself. I don't need to be a part of that.
See, and I think mine's in that middle ground for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think I've always operated well under flexibility. That's always been my thing, is trying to be as flexible as possible. But I love being prepared, like having more than I need just in case. So that does speak to me, but I think most of my life is having to be flexible. And so I think that's why I'm right there in that middle ground. I can't remember what the opposite of judging was.
Prospecting.
And I think I go back and forth. I think every time I take the test, it's different. So it might be also what's going on in the moment and what will tip the scale.
This is one that has changed for me. Yeah. I used to be prospecting. I have taken the test before and definitely gotten the P.
Well, yeah, and I was going to ask you about that.
Okay, so this is that upbringing thing. Definitely upbringing. It's J. Everything must be ordered and processed and all of that. And I do find peace. I love a good filing system. I don't like chaos. But I also, at my core, absolutely love to jump out of the plane. I might not even have a parachute. And I know that sounds crazy, but no, I would have a parachute because I'm ordered in my thinking, but no real plan on the destination of where I'm going to drop. And I would be totally excited about that. That's that entrepreneurial who I am at a core, who for more than half of my life, I was not allowed to engage in that, even though that was streaming through my veins. I wasn't really allowed to engage in that.
So, Lori,
now, when I'm older, I can.
I would also challenge that your health has pushed you into the J.
Oh,
you
my
have
health
to have
definitely.
organization. You have to have a plan. You have to know when your appointments are, how you're going to get there.
Yep.
So you've developed those skills in a way that you need now. So yeah, you may have gotten some of that when you were a kid, but I think, and I also know that there's so much risk if you're not ordered. And I've seen that in you, where you have to know on certain things, not everything, but certain things you do have to know the destination. You have to know what's going to come next. And if you don't, you get a little bit dysregulated and can be, you can look more chaotic when you don't know how you're going to get to this appointment or who's going to do what. So in those aspects, you tend to need that J a little bit more.
Yes, very, very true.
Yeah. Yeah. And so our last letter that we both, like, we all kind of, I think, let's see, Lori and, okay, so Lori and T are assertive. T is 68% assertive. Lori is 88% assertive. And I am the complete opposite at 74% turbulent. So turbulent means you are likely self-conscious, sensitive to stress, success-driven, perfectionist, and eager to improve. And their assertive nature often can be self-assured, even-tempered, and resistant to stress, refuse to worry too much, and tend to be self-confident when striving to achieve goals.
So I agree with everything except that I'm an absolute perfectionist. So I have to do all of those things, but be perfect at it. It's my weakness, So that's just something that I again grew up with, and is I'm working on that. I am a perfectionaholic, and I confess that out loud, and I'm working for full recovery.
And see me, I have been working for that A my entire life. That is something that has been one of those things about myself that I really wanted. I really wanted to be more assertive. I wanted to be that steady person that is confident. And now, that being said, doesn't mean that I'm confident all of the time. We've talked in the past, I have social anxiety, but that assertiveness has been my counterbalance to that social anxiety. And so I covet that A. I really do. I think that of all the, other than being an introvert, of all the letters, that A is the one that I place the most value on.
I love that.
Well, and I think for me, like, I do my very best. So I'm glad I didn't score much higher in the percentage of this, but I do my very best not to be self-conscious. But deep down, I think that's in my nature. And, I think we've shared a little bit in the past that for a long time, my skills were overlooked because I didn't have an educational background to stand behind them. I was looked at as I didn't have the capability. And so it just became very self-conscious of me to just believe that, well, my skills are not useful, or I, don't know the right thing. And so I was real self-conscious. And recently I'm proving it wrong in more ways than one. And I'm grateful to the people who are recognizing the skills that I have. And again, I'm grateful for God giving me those skills and guiding me on that way. But I am sensitive to stress, for sure. I hate tension. I hate, if my parents had a disagreement, I'd usually be in another room just because I didn't want to deal with it. When friends are fighting, I just want to pull my hands back, like, nope, I'm not a part of this. But on the other hand, there's parts of me that want to help because I want to, bring a peace to everybody. So I'm kind of like, I want to be more assertive and I want to be able to, like, so that is one thing I am working on, is trying to be a little more assertive.
So the T has its strengths though too. So being self-conscious means that you're self-aware in how you play a part in things. So self-conscious isn't always just, being self-conscious can impact our confidence. Mm-hmm. And that's an area that you're working on. And even I've seen growth in the amount of time I've known you. But that self-consciousness, it gives you the opportunity to evaluate how you're doing.
That's true.
What do you do with that evaluation? Do you use it to beat yourself up? Or do you use it to drive things that you want to change if they need to be changed? And sometimes that's the key, is being able to recognize, do I really want to change this about myself or about this situation? Do I need to? And being able to accept whether you can or can't, should or shouldn't, is kind of the key there.
I agree. I like that. Ditto to what she said.
So again, all of these results came from 16personalities.com. So definitely check out their website. I'll put the link in the description if you want to take your own test. We'd love to hear your results and see how well you agree or disagree on the results that you got. Because I think we all have, like, we all kind of were on the fence for some couple of them, but then other ones were like, oh yeah, we're definitely that. And we're going to talk in a little bit about, now that we have these results, what are we going to do with them? So we also, kind of for fun, I was like, oh, we should do the Clutter Bug test too. So it's a lady, I forget her name at the moment. She had a TV show on one of the home and garden networks or something. But this was after she'd had this Clutter Bug YouTube channel for years. And she discovered that there were like 4 major bug personalities regarding the way people organize and handle clutter. There's your bee, your butterfly, your ladybug, and your cricket, I believe is the other one.
Yes.
And so T and I both ended up being a bee, like a little buzzing bee. And it's like, we love visual abundance and organizational abundance. We prefer to see everyday used items instead of hiding them away. We're also a bit of a perfectionist and tend to pile items until we can put them away properly. And I totally am that. I will have a pile on my desk until I have the time to go figure out where it's going to go. I am totally that. But Lori ended up being a ladybug. She likes visual simplicity and organizational simplicity. She prefers to have all items hidden and out of sight. She also needs fast and easy solutions for organizing, like bins and baskets without lids. And she gets stressed with surface clutter.
Yes. So you can imagine living with a bee can drive me insane.
It reminds me of when you were in the hospital and I came to your house to help clean it before EJ moved in.
Oh, that's right.
And I had you on video and I was doing everything I could to torture you.
Oh, you were.
Put things out of place. And
that's right. I forgot. I
move things around.
But it was funny because you did make a mention. You're like, everything had a place and you knew where it was, and it was easy to find, and
I was gonna mess that up if I could.
You were. Oh my gosh, I was like, she's messing with my peace, she's messing with my calmness. Fly away, you little bee.
And I think for me, and I can't remember, I think I ended up being a butterfly once a long time ago, like, so my results had been different, but in the last week I've taken this test twice and I came up bee both times. And bees are very meticulous, and she uses the descriptions of micro and macro sorting and different kinds of things. And so I'm a very, like, everything needs to have a place, but only if I have time to sort and make that place happen.
Yeah, everything has to have a place to go eventually.
Right. And
none else have a place now.
Yeah. And the other one is like where it's visual or non-visual. Do you want to see it or do you not want to see it? And clutter, it's crazy because clutter drives me crazy. Piles on my desk drive me crazy, but actually, unless I have the time to sit down and pick everyone up and make it organized, I don't even want to touch it, and I'll just let the pile build until it's falling over or whatever. So I'm like, in my room is a completely different thing than out in Lori's, out in the living room where Lori has more of her domain. So like I have my laptop out there with, at the table, and I'll, have my little basket of some pens and some notepads, and I'll stuff all my little extra notes in there. And every couple of weeks I'll go through it and clean things out. But that's kind of my thing. And then the kitchen, yeah, I get a little anxious in the kitchen. Because, I want things out or at least know where things are. I don't like having to look for things.
So I
don't
take
see anything except for decoration.
I take great joy during the organization, but I have to be in the mood for it.
Yes,
and if I don't do it frequently enough, I get very aggravated. And so my ex-husband used to call it the flight of the bumblebee, which is ironic. Because that's what he would describe. I would come home from work and I would flit around the house doing all these different things. He's like, I just cleaned that. But I had to go through and touch it, basically.
Oh my God.
Pollinate.
Me too. I will get spurts of that. Exactly.
And I take great joy. And afterwards, I feel so good. And like there's this piece in me. And if I sense a storm coming, is usually one of the times I'm doing the flight of the bumblebee, because I cannot stand having a storm and having things out of place. Odd thing. Always been that way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So again, this was just another kind of fun little personality thing we were able to kind of do to just definitely see differences. And I think T had mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was on the recording or before, that how her and I there were definitely things her and I definitely aligned with. Whereas Lori was a little with the extrovert, that kind of changes some of the impact of some of her results. So yeah, it was just cool. So we kind of wanted to talk, what do we do with this information? Where do we go from here? Now that we know what our personalities are or have a general idea, how do we deal with it? How do we talk about it? I personally feel like it's a great way of me saying like, okay, remember the test, like this is my personality. So give me a little itch here, if somebody comes at me with some problem or something, like, okay, let me be honest with you. This is my personality. So you got, give me time, or just something like that. And you guys were hitting on it earlier. Like, this is not just static. It's not going to be this forever. You can make strives to make changes. If you see a result and you're like, I don't like being that type of person, what do you do about it? You work on it, study it out.
I agree. Yes, we've said it's not static. We've talked about embracing it. We've talked about, I'm discovering every day that flexibility and resiliency are things that I value, and that I want my life to be rich and full. Mm-hmm. I don't want it to be consumed with quantity. If tomorrow doesn't come, then I want today to be the best day, to be that rich day. And I want to learn how to take these things and use them to make that life rich and full. And that's what I would encourage anyone to do. I always say when I'm working with chronic illness groups, that I wouldn't wish chronic illness on my worst enemy. I wouldn't. It's tough. It's very difficult at times. But what I would wish on every single person that I meet is the clarity that it brings, so that we can be more aware of where we are and how fragile life is and how precious it is and how special and unique each of us are in that walk and on that journey. That I would wish on everybody. And often when faced with illness and death and some of those harder, more difficult things that the average Joe doesn't always get to experience or isn't experiencing yet, I would wish that on every person at every age. So,
yeah, I think chronic illness definitely gives clarity, and I think not only having it yourself, but also dealing with other people, your family members, dealing with it. You know, you and I were talking last night, even that I think I had shared, like, I definitely don't know what it's like to be a mom, but I definitely know what it's like to be a caregiver of two people at the same time. And even though my parents were adults, I was still taking care of them. I was cooking meals and taking them to doctor's appointments and making sure they were healthy and were fed. And, you know, so I took on that role as a caregiver. So parents care is a caregiving role. And so I can definitely understand that aspect of, you know, so yeah, I'm glad we have the personalities, and I'm glad we're on a spectrum. So we're not saying, oh yeah, you're 100% this and 0 this, because we're all having something. We just happen to lean more towards one side or the other. Or in like T's and I's case, there's a couple of more, we're like 50-50 almost, which is good in some ways, that you have both discernment on both sides. But also, like, is that where you want to be, or do you want to be more one or the other, and how can you work on that? Any thoughts, T?
Yeah, one of the common themes that I work on with people and talk about regularly is, how do we define something? I mean, a lot of times it just comes down to that. I can see people doing this and going, but I don't, like, or in my case, I don't want to be a defender. Maybe I want to be a protagonist. But sometimes that's self-defeating, because yes, we may desire to make some changes, but there's also some value in acceptance of who we are and what we bring to the table. And so I can admire the qualities that your guys' personalities bring to the table, and think, boy, you know, that would be great to feel that or to have that. But then that's almost kind of looking at myself like there's something wrong with me and who I am. And so it's okay to stop and say, hey, I've got some great strengths that I'm bringing to the table. And I think that if we were all protagonists, nothing would get done, right?
Amen.
Or too much would be getting done, and nothing would be coming out of it, because nobody's stopping to go, oh, I'm going to enjoy this for a minute. You know.
I remember somebody wrote in my yearbook, Laura, you need to stop and smell the roses. And I was like, oh, there's roses?
Yeah, right. But certain things wouldn't get done without a protagonist. Certain things wouldn't get done without a defender. What was what they called yours, EJ?
An architect.
Architect. I think I've been that before. Anyway,
you probably were.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need architects, we need defenders, we need protagonists, we need to, as a society and in any level of society, whether it's within our own families, within our workplaces, education, just being out in the world in general, we need all of these personality types to be able to have a whole puzzle. Right. Without it, the puzzle's missing pieces and it's not complete.
Yeah, you can't have a puzzle with all border or all inside, because you need a border. And yeah, exactly. So that's a really good point. And I think the three of us work really well together, and I'm glad we're not all the same personality, because that would make it very one-sided, I think. So yeah, it's definitely more well-rounded. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the podcast and what we're going to do with this and why we did this. So we thought, like, we're going to do a couple of episodes focusing on certain things that maybe are impacted by our personalities. And we haven't nailed down all those plans yet. We're definitely going to talk about them, but we just wanted to, like, I was like, why don't we just do one episode with just the personalities? Because we knew that this would take a while and we all have our thoughts. And we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to kind of talk about that. So I'm excited to do some more like directed podcasts on the personalities. You know, this isn't going to be just a couple of episodes and then we'll never talk about it again. I'm sure in the future we'll maybe go back to it, and hell, we might do the you know, the test again and see if we've changed, increased, decreased on something. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll always be an introvert, but there may be other things that I may change. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going with the podcast and why we wanted to dedicate a whole episode to this. We also are not used to talking about ourselves that much. We do, like, in certain things, but we tend to talk about like experiences we've had and outside sources. So this was a little different for us as well. And you know, it's episode 40. This is our 40th episode. Thanks for anyone who's been listening to us for this long. And we look forward to you guys sticking around for more. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at least with the podcast. Do you guys have any thoughts on it too?
I just, as usual, like to say thanks and these episodes always turn out more fun than I ever anticipate them to be. I enjoy them. And even when we're talking about a subject matter, like you said, I don't love to talk about me. I love to talk about others, and I love to teach, and I love to share. And yes, I'm extroverted, but you know, when we're turning the spotlight around, I'm like, gosh, I don't know that I want to be on display, so to speak. And yet had such a good time covering this topic and doing this. And I'm looking forward to the episodes that'll be upcoming. So.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think most people don't like to, you know, there's certain people that really do like to be under the spotlight, but most people get uncomfortable there to some degree, especially if there's any vulnerability. And so that's why I'm just really stressing to everybody to remember it's how you define things. And it doesn't have to be like I said, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like, yeah, I may not want to be extra, but I really appreciate those who are. And they bring a lot of life to me and a lot of just reminding me that to do and to get out and to do those things bring value to my life, and then to respect myself enough to give myself a break and say, okay, I need a break right now. And if I didn't know I was introverted, I would feel like and that this is a thing, I would feel like something was wrong with me, because, you know, like at the end of my days, I have to be aware that I am introverted and I have a very social job. So at the end of my day, sometimes I just need to not talk or just stare at a wall for a minute, you know, be okay with that. Yeah. So I think some self-acceptance is definitely can be very powerful.
Very.
Yeah, and I think you know, I highly encourage you guys to check this out. Please, I would love to hear what other people are.
Yes.
I know some people often know what theirs are with just looking at what the options are. Others are extremely surprised when they get their results. So please let us know either on social media, just through one of our direct messages, or you can email us. I'll give you that information in the outro. But yeah, definitely, you know, and you can also listen along and maybe hear like how we're different or how we're similar. And so you can reach out to us individually and be like, hey, I'm also this, or I'm close to you, or I get what you're saying. So we'd love to hear. So please let us know.
Definitely.
Yes.
Again, just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. You can find this episode on Anchor, YouTube, and most major podcast platforms, though Anchor is changing its name, I believe. So
got that email. Yep.
It's like, if you're not a subscriber, please, we'd love for you to be one. So don't forget to click hit the subscribe button, as well as like this episode if you liked it on YouTube, so we can kind of know what you like and don't like to hear. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. You could also email feedback and future episode ideas to us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. You can find us, EJ, Lori, and T online. Links for us are in the description box. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.